Hello
Hello everyone and welcome to AutoCAD 1 2D drafting at the Boston Architectural College. This week we're going to start looking at some new AutoCAD objects, drawing objects. Last week we pretty much focused exclusively on the line command or the line object and saw how to add those to our drawing, put them on the screen, and control them so that we could create a fairly accurate drawing. This week we're going to look at other objects that we use to create, but also look at the process of modifying and editing those objects, because editing and modifying is just as important in computer drafting as is actually creating the object on the screen. So to look at that, I want to kind of look at first some of the properties of AutoCAD objects. So if we open up Moodle and to our class, and we go over to the course resources side, we'll see a link there that says reference documents. And in the reference documents, something called AutoCAD graphical objects. And this is something that's published by Autodesk in relation to AutoCAD. And we see here on the first line, every piece of geometry you create is a distinct AutoCAD object type. And most AutoCAD object types can take several forms. For example, polygons and rectangles are both polyline objects. And then it goes on to talk about three-dimensional objects also. So here at the top of the list, we see all the objects that AutoCAD actually creates listed. So we see arc, circle, dimensions, hatch. At the top of the second page, line, which we worked with exclusively last week, and just below that something called LW polyline. And a little farther down the page, look, there's another word called polyline, and you'll see that LW polyline and polyline for us are very similar. Take a look at the descriptions next to the object name. So we have line, next to it a single line segment, related command line. And then right next to LW polyline, something much more elaborate description, a 2D line of adjustable width composed of line and arc segments. And you can continue reading that and then see that there are many related commands to the LW polyline as well as the polyline a little farther down the page. So here we have description of a couple of what AutoCAD considers to be basic object types, the line and the polyline or LW polyline. But each object, the objects are very different, and you can just tell by the description of them. And that one is a very simple description, the line command, and then the LW polyline or the polyline is a much more elaborate description with many other commands related to it. Then as you move down the page, it talks about other types of objects, more complex objects, particularly 3D objects in the lower portion of the document. So this document is useful as a reference to come back to, particularly as we get into working with these other types of objects. So let's go back to AutoCAD, and we're back here at the start page, and I'm going to go to my templates and open up the acad.dwt, our basic template. And here we're going to start working with a couple of these objects and compare them side by side. So let's start with the line command. Go up to the ribbon, click on it, and we've done this already. Just click points and we create several line segments on our drawing area. Then let's go back up to the ribbon and go to the command just to the right of line, and that is polyline. So click that, and just like the line, just click points to create what appears to be several segments, and then we're done. Hit enter to end the command, and now we have another object on the screen made up of polylines. So what's the difference between these two objects? If I type in erase, I can come over to my lines, and we see that just like the description on our page that we looked at before, each segment is an independent object. Each line, a line just has a start point and an end point, and if we make several lines, they're all independent and we can erase or modify individual parts of them. But if I type in erase and hit enter and then go over and pick the polyline, just picking one part of the polyline and all segments are selected. Now this way of editing, of starting a command and then selecting an object, has a specific name in AutoCAD. It's called verb-noun editing or verb-noun selection, where we start the command and then we select the object and then perform the command on the object. So here is the polyline. I started the rotate command, clicked one part of the polyline, and all segments are chosen because a polyline is one complex object. And then I can perform the command, and then when I'm done, hit enter. So I can click also the move command over here and then click align and then hit enter, and then I can pick the base point, the point which I'm going to control this operation from. I can either select a midpoint of the line here, or using my snap find the end point and then actually move the line from that point and connect it to my other line that I have on the screen. So that's a very typical way of working in AutoCAD. Starting the command either by clicking on the command in the ribbon or typing it in on the command line, hit enter, and then select the object that you want to perform the command on. So if you want to move a line, start the move command, then select your line and continue. But there's also other ways that AutoCAD supports in terms of editing objects, and these are more recent additions to AutoCAD, and that is something where we select the object first, like this line here, and when we do that without a command actually operating right now, we see that the object becomes highlighted and these little blue dots appear. These blue dots are called grips, and depending on what the object is, the grips are going to appear in different places. So in this example, on the line, we have grips at the endpoints and at the midpoint. Now if I click on one of the grips, say the midpoint here, notice what happens on the command line and on my dynamic input. It says that I've invoked the stretch command, and with the midpoint, all you can really do with the stretch is move the object. But if I click on one of the endpoint grips, you'll see that stretch comes in, and in fact I am changing the direction and length of the object by stretching it. This is called noun-verb object selection, or noun-verb editing, where we pick the object first and then perform the editing command by using the grips on the object. Another feature of this mode of editing is if I click the grip, and again I'm moving it or stretching it by the midpoint here, is that if I hit the space bar while I'm in this mode, notice what happens on the command line, that it goes from stretch to move and now to rotate. So I'm rotating around that point that I selected. Hit the space bar again, and now I'm scaling the object around that point. Hit the space bar again, and I come back to a mirror command, which is copying around a point or a line. Space bar again, and I'm back to the stretch. So I can cycle through all these commands just by hitting the space bar on my keyboard while I'm in this mode. Another thing is that while I'm in this mode, I have options on the command line. So while I'm in the stretch function or move function here, I can go down to the command line and click on the C for copy. And not only am I moving, but I am also making multiple copies of the object, of the initial object, or in this case, the line. And the way to get out of this command or this mode is just by hitting the enter key twice or the escape key twice, and that will cancel the command that you're in and will also deselect the object so the grips disappear. Now if I try this same mode on our polyline object, note what happens here, that when I select it, there are these one kind of grip that appears on the vertices and then another kind of grip that appears at the midpoints. And if you grab the grips at the endpoints or the vertices, they move the object or edit the object in a very different way than the points at the midpoints of the line segments, where they kind of stretch the entire line along with its connecting segments. And just like we saw with the line segment, if I hit the space bar while in this mode, I cycle through a series of commands, move, rotate around the point that I selected, and then hit the space bar again, and now or hit enter and I'm out of it, and then click another point, and then again I'm stretching, hit the space bar, I start the move, and now I'm moving from that point that I selected. Again, space bar, I'm now rotating around that point that I selected, or scaling the object, changing the size based on that point, and then hit the space bar again, and again I cycle through the command, so now I'm moving. And at any point I can go back and just hit spacebar and go back to a move mode. Now an interesting thing happens if I try and use copy here. When I click on that, you'll see that it kind of throws me out of the command. I'm no longer moving based on that midpoint the midline point where I was moving it. But if I click on one of the vertices and then go to move and then come down and click on the copy option, I in fact can copy it. It will support that. So you just have to be aware that AutoCAD has its quirks, and for some reason won't do it if you're moving on one of the midpoints of the polyline, but appears to support it fine if you're moving on the vertice point, one of the vertice points of the polyline. Okay, I've jumped screen here a little bit, so things are going to appear different than they were on the last portion of the video. But what I want to do now is just clear this screen up, and I'm going to do it by clicking down here in the lower right-hand corner and drag a crossing window across all my objects on the screen. And here they all get selected with their grips, but I'm just going to type in an E, enter, and all those objects will be deleted. Okay, I'm going to create another kind of object here, but first I'm going to turn off the dynamic input for a bit. And what I'm going to do is go up to the ribbon and choose rectangle and click on that. And it just, look on the command line, it says give me a start point, and then I can drag another point, and you'll see that in fact I'm creating a rectangular object. Now the rectangle is in fact simply a closed polyline. So if I click on it, you'll see the grips appear like on the polyline with the midpoint grip and the vertice grip, and behaves just like we saw with the polyline. I can grab these and stretch it out. So there really is no object called a rectangle in AutoCAD. It's simply a closed polyline. I'm going to draw another rectangle using a slightly different method. This time I'm going to just type in REC on the command line, hit enter, and look at the prompt. It says give me a start point, so I'm going to click a start point. And then once I do, the command line changes, and I have some options there, and one of the options is dimension. So if I type in D on the command line and hit enter, it asks for a length, and it defaults to 10. I'm going to put in, say, 15, hit enter, and then it asks for a width, and I'm going to put in 12, and then hit enter. So it draws a rectangle of that size, but it's not really finished because it doesn't have an orientation, so I need to click in the upper corner. So let's look at one more object that is in fact a closed polyline, and that's if we go back up here to that rectangle command on the ribbon and do the pull down on the little arrow by clicking on it, we see that there is another option here called polygon. And if we hover there for a moment or two, we get the more elaborate kind of help window pop up. And notice what it's saying. It's saying that the way we draw this object is by essentially either inscribing it or circumscribing it in a circle. So notice the little diagram there and how that describes what is happening there. The one on the left is inscribed inside of a circle, and the one on the right is circumscribed about the outside of the circle. So let's execute that command and see exactly how that plays out. So I'll click on polygon. Notice on the command line it comes up and it's defaulting to a 4-sided object, number of sides 4. Let's change it to say 5 so we can be clear that we're creating a new object here. And then it asks for the center of the polygon, or it gives us an option where we can choose an edge. But let's stick with this, the center option, because that's like drawing that circle that we saw described on the little help there for the polygon. So I'll just click a point. And now it asks, is it going to be inscribed in the circle or circumscribed about the circle? So the default is I, or inscribed. I'm going to change it to C so that it'll be circumscribed around the outside of the circle. And then it asks me to essentially put in the radius of this, and notice that as I'm dragging this down, that it's going down to the midpoint of one side. And I can put in a distance for the radius. Let's say I'll put in 4 and hit enter. And there we have the 5-sided object where this side is 4 units from the actual center that we picked when we first started the command. Okay, we have 3 closed polylines on the screen, a couple of rectangles, and then a 5-sided or pentagon object, all closed polylines. And what I'm going to do is just to demonstrate something more about the idea of properties and modifying objects. I'm going to change one of these. I'm going to go up to my modify panel on the ribbon, and I'm going to click the little pull down on the title bar, and in there you'll see that we have in fact an edit polyline. So if I click on that, notice what happens down on the command line. I get the select polyline. So I'm going to just pick, say, this large rectangle that we drew first, and as soon as I click on that, notice what happens on the command line. I have square brackets with a bunch of different options in them, And one of the options is width. And if I click on that width, or I can either click on the width or I can type in W, but in this case I'll click on the word width, and it comes up and prompts me for a new width for all segments. So let's say if I put in 0.5 and hit enter, then the polyline takes on a new thickness or width. And that's one of the properties that a polyline can have. It can have a line thickness. A regular plain line where we just have something going from 2 points cannot have this property. So it's just one of the things that a polyline can have. So I'm going to hit enter to get out of that command, and I'm going to undo that because I just want to show you a different way in which AutoCAD, the interface, works, because some of you may want to work one way or another, and just to show you that AutoCAD has many ways of doing the same thing. So I'm going to go down and turn on the dynamic input, and I'm going to go and do that same thing that I did before. I'm going to go up to the modify panel, put the pull down, click polyline edit, and you'll see that I get the prompt on the command line as well as on my cursor, select polyline. And so I'm going to pick the same one, click on it, and as soon as I do, notice that all the options that I have down on the command line within the square brackets also appear as a little pull down menu right here below the enter option. So here I can click on the word width, and then I get a blank, a little dialog that on the right next to my cursor, where I can put in a width. So I can put in, say, I'll put in 0.75 this time, and hit enter, and sure enough that works, and I can hit enter again to get out of the command. So two different ways of doing the same thing. One strictly using the command line, the other one using the dynamic input, which you can turn on and off by the little icon down there on the drawing aids bar. All right, I want to do one more thing to our closed polyline objects, and that is I'm going to explode it. And to explode it, I type in the letter X on the command line, hit enter, and you'll see the prompt comes up, explode, select objects, and I'm going to click on my polyline, closed polyline object, the rectangle that I gave a width to, and select it, and then hit enter. And once I do that, notice that the thickness that I gave to that polyline goes away. And not only that, but this is no longer a closed polyline. What the explode command does to a polyline is that it reverts it back to simple lines. So now if I click on one side, notice that just that side gets selected. It's no longer connected to the other sides of the rectangle. It is no longer a closed polyline. And if I click on one of these grips, I am in fact just moving that particular segment of line. So the explode command will strip a polyline of any of its properties and break it into simple individual line segments. Let's take a look at just a couple of more objects in this video. And so I'm going to hit escape a couple times to, whoops, got to click on my screen first, hit escape a couple times to get rid of the grips on my lines I selected. And let's go and take a look at another object, the circle object. So if we go to the ribbon here and we see that we have the circle option, and it has a pull down, and the pull down provides several different ways to create a circle. So we have center radius or center diameter. So let's do the simple one, center radius. If I click on that, and I've still got my dynamic input on, so it's copying whatever is appearing down on the command line, so it's asking for a center point of the circle. And notice that on the dynamic input bar that's floating around with my cursor, it says specify center point for circle or, and you'll see there's a little arrow pointing down. If I use the down arrow on my keyboard, that opens up and gives me some of the options. Well, that's just like we saw with the explode, with the polyline edit command. Using dynamic input, is that the options that appear down on the command line also appear on that little pull down on the dynamic input dialog that follows your cursor around. So whoops, I clicked, I don't want to do that. I'm going to hit escape to get out of that, and I'm going to go back up and hit circle, and center radius again. So it's asking me for a center point of the circle. I'm going to snap to, say, the midpoint of my smaller rectangle here, click, and then it's asking for a radius. So I can either drag the radius out, and because I have dynamic input on, I'm getting a little readout there of the size that I'm dragging. So I'm up to 4.5. So why don't I put in 4.5 as a radius distance, and so now I have a circle with the center on the midpoint of that side of the rectangle, and it's got a radius rather of 4.5 inches or 4.5 inches. Okay, so there, as we saw on the pull down there up at the draw panel on the ribbon, that there are several other ways to create circles. So let's try one that says here a tan radius. What tan radius does is that it asks us to pick a side of an object and then another side on another object, and then it will ask for a radius. Now if you look on the command line or on the prompt that's following my cursor around with the dynamic input, it's saying 4.5. Now that is a suggestion by AutoCAD. It may be the fact that I put that in on the other one, or it also could be that it's suggesting that might be the largest radius that we could have. So I'm going to hit enter and see what happens, and nope, that doesn't like that because it's throwing it way out off of the screen off to one side. So I'm going to do undo, and I'm going to try that again. So again, tan radius, and I'll pick the side of my rectangle and then my sloping side down here. And clearly the 4.5 doesn't work, so let me try, say, 2. And yes, a circle with radius 2 will fit in there with two sides touching the two side objects that we are tangent to and having a radius of 2 inches in this case. Now, what happens if I use the noun-verb method of editing a circle? That is, selecting the object first by clicking on it, and I get the grips on the circle, and notice how the grips appear on the circle. So a grip appears at the center of the circle, and then one grip appears at each of the so-called cardinal points of the circle, north, south, east, and west. And how do these grips behave if we select them? So if I click on the center grip, just like it happened with the line, or even the polyline, the first thing that happens is it comes up as stretch. Well, if I'm clicking the center of the circle, I'm not really stretching it, I'm just kind of moving the object. And if I hit the space bar like we did before, sure enough, it cycles through those commands, and it goes to rotate, but rotating a circle doesn't really seem to make that much difference. So but scale, I can kind of stretch it out based on that center point, and then hit again, and a mirror doesn't make much sense for a circle, and then hit again, and I'm back to stretch. So if I hit escape, that gets rid of that. So the clicking on the center grip in a circle, really all it does is allow you to relocate it or move it, even though it says stretch. If I grab on one of the ones on the cardinal points, then sure enough I am stretching, and I am changing the radius or diameter of that circle by dragging it. So with the grips on a circle, using the noun verb, choosing the object first, the grips are going to behave in a way that's very specific to the circle, and that it's going to change the radius or diameter in terms of stretching, or you're just going to relocate it by grabbing the center and actually moving the circle to a different location. The last object we'll look at is the arc. So I want to hit escape a couple times to get rid of the grips on my circle that I chose. And let's go up to the ribbon and the draw command and go to the arc option. And if I do the pull down there, you'll see there are many different options about how to draw an arc or construct an arc. So it really depends on what it is you're drawing, or how you're drawing it, and what other objects exist on your screen. Let's do a pretty simple one here. I'll do the second one down, says start, center, end. And it means that description is just that. The first thing that it asks for is the start point. So let's say I have my small rectangle here. I click on this. That's my start point. And then it asks for the center point of the arc. So the center, in this case, would be the midpoint of my side of the rectangle. And then the end point would be there at the other side, at the top corner of the rectangle. And there you have the arc gets drawn. Now, what if I tried that on the other side here, over on the left side? So I go and hit arc, start, center, end, and pick the same points. Well, sure enough, it draws the arc on that right side of the line. And it's doing that because that's the direction of positive rotation. Because I clicked at a bottom point first and then moved up, that's moving in a positive direction in AutoCAD. So therefore, the arc rotated in that positive direction, and the same way here. If I wanted the arc to be on the other side of this line, I would have to move in a negative direction to get the arc to come down along that side. So I'll just show that quickly. So start, center, and end, and the arc will appear on the left side of the line, as you see here. So let's just demonstrate what happens if we choose the arc like we did with the circle and the lines. And notice it gets grips very similar to a circle. There's a center point. There are grips at the ends of the arc, and then at one of the cardinal points, at the midpoint essentially of the arc. If I grab that cardinal point, it drags the radius, but it also, notice how it distorts the arc in that it causes it to create, the radius increases on all sides all the way around. If I grab one of the endpoints, I can in fact extend the arc down and almost create a circle with it. And if I grab the middle or central point of the arc, it behaves just like it did with the circle or the line, in that I am moving the arc to a different location on the screen. So that's a quick kind of, or maybe not so quick, survey of several kind of basic object types that we're going to work with in AutoCAD and how they behave when you go in to modify them. And so in our next video, we'll get into a lot more detail with that and construct an actual design based on some of the things we looked at in this video. So we'll see you then.